I am here with Greg Renoff, the author of Van Halen Rising, How a Southern California Backyard Party Band Saved Heavy Metal. Now, let me tell you something. I did a little bit of research and I saw that you wrote a book back in 2012 called The Big Tent, The Traveling Circus in Georgia, 1820 to 1930. Now, anybody out there that knows Van Halen knows what kind of spectacle that band put on. I thought, man, some people might think that's what, why did he write a book about a circus? If you want to learn about the circus first and then learn about Van Halen.
On target. Absolutely on target. We can talk about that too. That actually, yeah, that's because one thing kind of did lead to the other in a indirect way, but it did.
It is so much like that. And I had a troll on my channel who said to me, he said, you went and joined the circus, and what did you expect? Because my story is a cautionary tale about the pitfalls of rock and roll and chasing that lifestyle and it's a myth. The rock star lifestyle is a myth, and it's something that you can't sustain for your entire career.
Yeah.
And
Or you
so,
get just put into amber like some guys who just want to try to pretend like it's a certain year anymore, and it's tough. It's tough because the time marches on and you can't stay the same.
yeah, you can't stay the same. And here's the thing. There is a latest documentary out by Paramount Plus. Now, I don't know if you've seen it, but The Nothing But a Good Time. Have you seen
Mhm.
that yet?
I have not. It's on my watch list, but I know some of the guys who are in it, obviously, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. I know the book.
Now, because your book says how a Southern California backyard party band saved heavy metal,
Hmm.
I did a whole review of the series, and I said it was Van Halen that inspired the entire thing. And they barely mention them at the beginning. And then towards the end, when they admit that, well, it's a clone of David Lee Roth, which was Bret Michaels, which is a clone of Bret Michaels, but it all
Yeah.
stemmed back from what they did. If it hadn't been for Van Halen, we'd all be wearing skinny ties and listening to Devo, and that would have turned into a whole different other thing.
Yeah, I mean, I even think about how when Roth was spending a lot of time in Hollywood, going out in 81, 82, he was going to the punk clubs. He was also going to Starwood to see Mötley Crüe, and those guys were basically like, coming in their pants when Roth would come out and introduce them and stuff like that. I mean, it's just, and Pierce, all those guys all kind of will admit in a in a way that obviously that Van Halen was the kind of the number one inspiration. And musically, we can, I think, talk about the genealogy of some of the bands and the sounds, but certainly there's no question about it. Even Kevin DuBrow, God rest his soul, was extraordinarily sort of bitter about Van Halen. He got this year in 1983 where they were the biggest hard rock band in America for sure, and they had done really well in Europe as well, and he was still kind of like throwing shade at Van Halen, which was kind of a weird thing, and led him to sort of say a lot of stuff that he shouldn't have said about other bands too. But it's even Kevin talked about how oh, Van Halen got the deal and we got left in the dust, and that's another big issue about Quiet Riot and Van Halen in terms of the quality of the music. But yeah, yes, I think I have not seen the documentary, so I don't want to comment on it yet. But I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I would certainly say that in terms of the inspiration for the bands and Hollywood being the place to go, Van Halen was massively important. AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, some other bands, obviously musically in terms of the sound, I'd say AC/DC is right up there in terms of influence with Van Halen on like Cinderella and a lot of just a whole Crocus. I mean, go through all these bands except that were influenced one way or the other by AC/DC. But in terms of, I think, Hollywood becoming ground zero and just sort of the sound of the 80s, Van Halen was just hard rock was just was really top two or three bands in terms of just music.
Yeah. Everybody wanted to sound like Eddie. and no one could figure it out back then. I mean, I was out there, and by the time I'm playing on the strip, it was 88, 89, 1990. We're still chasing that Van Halen, trying to find David Lee Roth, trying to get your amp to sound like Eddie's amp. And man, nobody really knew exactly back then what it was. Yeah, you could go call up Jose, and you could go to Charvel and do that. But I mean, look at Charvel. Their whole thing, their whole branding of that hot rodded Strat thing came from Eddie. And
Right.
that's what
Right.
all those guys played. All of them were
Right.
playing Jackson and Charvel.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing too, even when I did the book with Ted Templeman, I remember he told me when he first heard Ross call it a whistle scream, that high register scream. He's like, I didn't even know how he did it. Like, I didn't understand how he did it. But that was another thing that was just so distinctive. And there's just a few, just a few guys, Ralph being the kind of the best of the best in terms of doing that. Like, very few people could actually do it and sound like Roth. And people tried, but they did screams, but it never quite had that distinctive Roth tone to it, which is another signature thing about Van Halen. Like, he did that, and like Ted said, that was Ted was a singer himself, and it was just like that was unusual, and I wasn't even sure how he did that vocally, but he knew that was something he wanted to blow up on the record too. This is distinctive, right? Distinctiveness
Yeah.
being the key with these singers.
The whole sound, like I can remember hearing in 1978, hearing You Really Got Me on the radio. And just, it was like one of those moments where you kind of freeze, and I'm here. And what really struck me was the backing vocals.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded to my ears, it was almost like a synthesizer, because they had that reverb, that plate reverb kind of going on it, and it's just they're holding those notes, and it's the sound of California, because it harkens back to the Beach Boys.
Right.
And it's
Right.
something that none of the progenitors or thieves of the style ever matched. The fact
Right.
that these guys were all singing, and creating that sweet, sound. It was heavy, but it was also melodic.
Templeman actually said to me specifically, I remember the phrase, I wanted it to be sun-kissed, like hard rock. Like, he meant like not, like sun-kissed, like just like the Beach Boys with the vocals. Yeah, so just sort of like a upbeat. And he talked about some of the songs that were on the Simmons demo. I played for him, and we listened together. He had not listened to the Simmons demo probably since 1976 or whenever he heard it first. And he said, yeah, like the House of Pain. Like, he's like, yeah, it's cool, but it was like he's like, I didn't want it to be dark. I didn't want it to be downbeat. And he said, yeah, we had some like, Running with the Devil, which is powerful and, kind of dark. But he said, I wanted it to be upbeat and sort of a happy sound to it. And that's really was what, again, in terms about the influence for the 80s. I mean, that's the, like party rock. That was the vibe. And Templeman could have said, well, we're going to do, all the minor tone stuff. There's a lot of stuff on the Templeman demo. Peace of Mind being one. There's a couple of other songs. If you listen to those 25 songs that are kind of, they're minor key and they're just more dirgy, and they're just, kind of a darker. And he was like, I didn't want really, they cannibalized those songs for other stuff in some cases, but he's like, I didn't really want it to be that to be the dominant. Yes, we could have Mean Street, but I don't want that to be the dominant Van Halen sound. I want it to be much more, hey, we're having a good time and this is fun.
And that's the important thing. And I also want to mention the Ted Templeman book, A Platinum Producer's Life in Music. You also had a huge hand in working with Ted on that. And I also want to let everybody know that there's going to be an Amazon link. I'm going to get it right out of the gate that you're going to be able to click. And I'm telling you this right now, Van Halen Rising is one of the greatest rock biographies or development stories ever written, because the amount of detail in that is just absolutely incredible. I knew when I bought the Ted Templeman book, I knew that I was going to get the details that I wanted. I wasn't going to walk away and go, oh, he just kind of skimmed over stuff. No, it's really incredible the amount of research in that book. And for anybody that's a fan of Van Halen, you have to have that book. There's my plug right there.
I appreciate that. I mean, yeah, I worked on it for a number of years, obviously, and did a large number, over 200 interviews for it. And I just say that just to say the audience that it was just, for me, it was like my Moby Dick. I was like obsessed. I mean, I just knew there were so many things I wanted to chase down, and there were always new avenues opening for things that I wanted to get more into. I mean, even things like what later on in years later, I found out about other clubs that they played that I didn't really know anything about when I did Van Halen Rising. And maybe there would have been three sentences or maybe what, but it was always, you know, I found out about, Starwood and Whiskey, obviously very early on because they were the Hollywood ones, but then there were places like Barnacle Bills, and there were places like the International Casino, which was a bowling alley in Duarte, which had shut down and had been turned into a rock club. And they actually played Van Halen, all the bands that played there. And these are local bands that played where the bowling pins used to be. That's where they played. Wow. And like basically like the kids would sit on the lanes. They put plywood over the lanes, and this, so they just had repurposed it into a club. These are nowhere places, but these are places where people like Mark Kendall would tell me, like, I saw Van Halen and it blew my mind. It's like I sat there, at this tiny little club with 75 people, and I was just blown away by how great Eddie was. And that's, for me, that was the origin stories that I wanted to kind of chase down. Tracy G being another guy who I did a lot of talking to, was great. Later, played with Dio, obviously, and with Vinny Appice in a band called World War III. And just getting those eyewitness accounts from people about how impactful it was. And for me, too, that was the thing. When I was working on the book, I really, really understood that for people who were around, and particularly musicians, but, even, people who weren't, like, it was life-changing for them. Particularly because Van Halen became famous, right? But also because they became famous because they were so good. And these folks could look back and go, I saw Eddie Van Halen at 18 years old playing in a backyard, and it blew my mind. The other story I'll tell you really quickly is the one I heard from a guy by the name of Tom Broderick, who's a Pasadena local, who was one of Van Halen's roadies in 77. He went on the road with them for part of 78, ended up leaving the road. But he told me that he used to come home when he was like 15 or 16, in 75 or 76, telling his dad, Eddie Van Halen, he's as good as the guys who play the Forum. And his dad would be looking over the LA Times. He'd be like, you're crazy. You're crazy. It's just because he's your friend. And he said he brought home the Guitar Player magazine story, one of the first Guitar Player magazine stories in 78 or whatever. And he showed him, he goes, you see, I told you, wow. I told you, because he showed it to his dad, and his dad was like, oh, I guess you were right. Kind of had to admit, like, yeah, he was right. He was that good. But that was the stuff that got me excited, was about the people seeing it at the beginning, and then seeing the development, how those guys worked their way out of playing clubs, playing backyards, and were able to break through at a time when, like, again, how saved heavy metal, when hard rock at the time would have been called heavy metal, was not in fashion, really. It was kind of a passe and was seen as dinosaur rock, literally called, like, by major rock magazines, dinosaur rock.
Yeah. It had to be taken to the next level. It had to be an Eddie Van Halen, because if those other copycat bands had been next, they would have been no, and the labels, but Van Halen was so undeniable that a musician, it took a guy like Ted Templeman, who was a musician and was also a jazz musician, to go, this guy's like the next Art Tatum or something. He's like Charlie Parker. This is the spirit of real, art, and the thing that, Eddie Van Halen had written solos. I mean, he had parts that he played.
Right.
Every time you saw him in every bootleg, it's like a Hendrix bootleg. He adds little twists and turns.
Right.
Plays, and that was the reason why you would have to go see him live, because you'd be like, okay, well, but what is he like live? And then you go see it live, and then it's a whole nother level of adding pieces and bits and pieces. But it took that genius to make it say, well, wait a minute, maybe hard rock's not done. Maybe if somebody can come along that's just so undeniable, because, at that time, and I was probably, I don't know, 11 or 12 years old, and I'm playing guitar and I'm listening to Jimi Hendrix, and I'm waiting. Who's the next guy? Like, I'm buying records going, okay, I pick up on this Hendrix thing. What is the next thing that's coming? And so you're buying records, and then all of a sudden, boom, this is the guy, and it's rare that something comes along like that that just, blows everybody away and takes it to the next level. I don't know if we'll ever see a moment like that in time again.
And to credit, and it's interesting to credit the guitar community, the guitar journalism community in particular. There was a recognition from a lot like Steve Rose and a lot of the guys who were out there who were writing Jazz Obrecht and stuff like that, who really could see that this guy was a game changer. And it's interesting because I think Van Halen didn't get a lot of credit initially from a lot of critics. They were just like, well, it's just a rehash of this, a rehash of that. And they sort of all look down at Van Halen. But to the credit of the guys who are writing, they really did sort of see the genius of Eddie Van Halen. And just to kind of circle back to the Templeman thing, the one thing I would say is that other producers who heard Van Halen in clubs went to see Van Halen, they didn't get it. And they talked a lot about, you'd hear quotes later that it was just too uncontrolled. Eddie would say that, like, we hear from guys who are major guys in the industry who will come and see us, it's just, the guitar playing is too uncontrolled. I don't like it. And that's where Ted, look, there's Angus and other guys who are playing very frenetically and very frantically.
Yeah.
But to Ted's credit, he didn't try to turn them into Foreigner. Like, I mean, obviously Roth can't sing like that, but he didn't try to like dial it back. He wasn't like, oh, we got to have it be like, and when he did dial it back on the record, or Eddie did it, I think it was all natural. I mean, Ed wasn't getting like coached by Ted how to play, like on Little Dreamer, which is much more melodic. It's just coming from the soul. It's not like, I'm sure Ted had opinions about things, but I'm sure Ted never was like, play like this, play like that to Ed with those, especially with that first record. I mean, later on, maybe there was more, more thoughts he sort of like sent Ed's way in terms of composition and stuff like that. But I think it was just like, get it on tape, like just go, like, we're going to have 3-4 solos and I'm the one or whatever. It's at least 2, in the outro, it's like, just play. And to, again, those guys, they were playing that way. And for Ted to hear that and go, yeah, this is good at what it's going to be like. We're going to streamline, this and sort of make it sound sonically slick, but I'm not going to try to like, Eddie, you gotta, it's too much, or you're like, less notes or whatever, that stuff. You just go. Just blow, just like you said, just like a jazz guy, just blow over this stuff.
Yeah, and it's like it's this bombastic thing, but it's controlled. But to Ted Templeman's credit, he could have ruined the vibe by trying to pull a guy back too much. I mean, there is red light fever, and some guys the red light comes on, and it's the Warner Brothers Frog. It was amazing, and it was singing a while ago, and then the red light comes on, and it just sits
right.
And so,
right.
It all could have been destroyed in that first, recording session. The wrong choices and all of that, and it's just the fact that it all came together. I was amazed. I don't want to give any spoilers away from this book because I want everybody that watches this to buy this. But I was amazed at some of the inside stuff about the backing vocals, that there may have been somebody else besides the 3 main guys contributing. And I'll leave that as a tidbit. So buy the book, fool.
Yeah, there was, for me being able to talk to so many people who were around the band, there were some revelations that were, for me, it was like, wow, I didn't know that. And even after working on the book for a few years, there were always things that popped up that it was a cool revelation. The one thing I was going to circle back to the Ted factor, Ted did mention to me very late in the process of doing the Ted Templeman book that he remembered that when they worked on You're No Good on the second record, that he said he really wanted it when Roth came in and screamed. He said, I told Ed, I said, it's like, to me, it's like Psycho. It's like, you're no good. And that's why he said that, Ed was kind of understanding, like he wants to be like, so like intense. He's like, the moment when the shower opens and you scream and you're shocked. And Ed did those really, really intense bends. He said to me that Ted was like, that was Ed's way to kind of match the scream of Roth, right? To be like, you're no good, where it's sort of like starts real slow and mellow. And then suddenly it's like aggressive and almost violent. He said that's the way he wanted it to sound. But obviously a whole run of albums, but the first album is the blueprint for so much that came later. I mean, even beyond the sort of caricature bands that came in the late 80s or much more overt over copying, the guys who stole a little bit more appropriately, it's just was so influential. There's nothing that can be overstated, especially about Roth and Ed in terms of the influence on 80s rock. I mean, I don't think there's any way to overstate it. I mean, it's just a fact. They were very influential. I mean, that's period.
And you have obviously Ed and the sound, but then you have this quintessential front man and the blonde hair and the first album with the leather pants and the studded belt, and like a disco shirt. Now the shirts that Dave and Eddie are wearing, they look like the kind of shirt, a polyester shirt that a guy that's got a little bindle in his front pocket and he's you doing, ladies? It's literally like, let's go get some nice disco shirts to put on, because it was such a new thing that they were doing.
Yeah.
They were kind of like, well, this is my nice shirt, and
yeah.
But the other thing is the promotion. And that was the Sunset Strip, was then when bands, hand out flyers, meet girls, get girls to your show, have that appeal. I mean, you could go down the line and say all of those things, were so influential on that. It can't be overstated.
There's that great, Rodney Bingenheimer wrote a couple of accounts about seeing Van Halen for the first time, and he was important in helping those guys kind of climb the ladder in Hollywood. He talked about, I went to Gazzari's, and the Gazzari's was not a place in 1976 that you went looking for bands to sign, because Gazzari's was a largely cover song place, right? You played covers. But he said that as soon as you got in there, he said there were a lot of girls, like a ton of girls. And he's like, right away, that got my radar up. Thinking like, okay, what's going on? This is kind of, this band playing this club. And then he heard Van Halen, and Rodney went up to Roth and said, "Do you guys have originals? Do you guys play right? Like, basically, like, why are you playing here?
Yeah,
don't you guys have originals?" And he was like, and basically the line from the band was, "Yes, we have originals, but Bill pays us. Like, Bill pays us like not great, but he's like, it's regular, it's steady money." And that's when he said, "I think I can get you into Starwood." And that was in May. That was in May of 1976, and they kind of had to break away from Bill Gazzari's club, and Bill fired them and basically said, if you start playing Starwood, you can't play here anymore. But Rodney kind of, obviously, who had a great, just a great ear and a great radar for what was going to be hot. He could see the potential, but kind of going up to those guys and like, "Don't you have originals?" And they're like, "Yeah." And Ed having to go, and Dave and the rest of those guys kind of have band meeting, decide they're gonna go down the road and start playing Starwood, but also around the corner, I guess, or down the road. But also, of course, the other thing being interesting too is that once you started playing Starwood and Whiskey, is that you really did have to like live or die by your songs, and then, because you couldn't go into Whiskey and play, Casey and the Sunshine Band. That wasn't what it was about. It was about playing originals.
Yeah, but now I will say this, because I thought about it the other day. Most of those bands on the Strip, there were some good, when I was out there were some good players, and then there were some guys that looked good in their part, and some bands that just looked good, and then there were some that were good. But the musicianship, as a whole, as these bands couldn't have gone and done 4 sets, at the local club. And Van Halen learning all those songs and playing these gigs, these brutal gigs that they probably were making $75 for the whole band or something, and putting in that time, that could have been the one thing that just, I mean, when you got to play 4 sets and there's one guitar player, no keyboard player, and you got to play disco songs. Well, you got to figure out a way to fill that arrangement out, because there's nothing else there. So you got to figure out how to play the pocket, but then add in the horn parts or the leads or whatever. But that set them apart, because there were bands, and I'm talking giant bands, where there were members in LA that couldn't play a 12-bar blues.
Right. One comes to mind in particular. had session guys play on their debut record. But it's interesting too because people have asked me, and I wish I could have asked Ed or Alex. Maybe Alex will talk about this in his book that's coming out. I always thought that the 5 45-minute sets and having to play, yeah, you play ZZ Top, but you play a lot of pop music as well. That had to be incredibly important for those guys in terms of crafting their songwriting because they played so many years where they had to be like, let's just say, learn a Bad Company song, then learn, as I mentioned, a KC and Sunshine Band, maybe learning Orleans Still the One, and then doing a Kool and the Gang song, whatever. They were doing all these different types of songs. I always thought that had to be just an incredible education, particularly for Ed, but for Roth too. Had a great who Templeman told me, like, Roth knew every Motown, every Stax song. He's like, he had an incredible song knowledge. He's like, Dave and I could sit there and talk about songs forever. He said that the guy knew the music history and knew the records, and to sort of have that and then go, oh, we need to, we need to write shorter song. We're going to write, kind of write these shorter songs. We're going to get away from the 6-minute song thing, which they did a couple of those in the demo. You can imagine that you have that training, basically, like copying the records when you're a little kid as a Cream records, but then you're sort of like what's hot on the radio in 1975, 76, 77. That's what they were playing. That's what they were playing at Gazzarri's, obviously, along with, slipping in an original or playing maybe a weird Black Sabbath song at 1 a.m. or something like that. They were playing pop songs.
Yeah. And getting their thing together more than just because there is a huge difference between rehearsal and playing a show. And you can rehearse 5 nights a week, and you might sound amazing in your rehearsal facility, but then when you bounce on over to the club and it sounds completely different, and you got drunks, yelling at you, and you maybe got some seductive young ladies in the front, or any number of things going on, that's when you prove yourself every night, and one gig equals like 100 rehearsals.
Right. Yeah. And, that's the other thing too, that is so interesting to me is when I talk to people, they would talk about just how entertaining they were at Gazzarri's. That Roth had all these little lines like, oh, we're going to take a pause for the cause and messing around. The name of the doorman at Gazzarri's is kind of a legendary figure. His name is escaping me, but just basically, the banter back and forth that Roth would have, not just with the girls, but with the guys who worked at the club and the bartenders, and sort of, there was just this ability to even make a room that was silent sound fun, right? Like, even like that's what people kind of made clear to me. Like, even when there was really not that many people there, they seemed like they're having a great time, like they were playing the Forum, and not just sort of the bigness of it, just sort of it was never awkward or quiet. It was just always seemed like it was a great time. Like, these guys are having the best time, and he's talked about how Roth had that gift to really be an entertainer and be able to keep the room up even when there weren't that many people there.
Yeah, and the humor. And if you flash forward to 2015 or whenever they got going, Steel Panther. I mean, I thought about it. All those bands on the Strip, we were all taking ourselves way too seriously. If we had just said, no, wait a minute, it's humor. If we're gonna be sexual, let's be funny about it. Let's have, and with Roth, with Beautiful Girls and the little kiss at the end, and he's joking between songs and laughing, that you could just feel the personality on the record. And I don't think people, they copied the outside, but they didn't really get into the heart of it.
Well, right, and that's the thing. I mean, I partially for sake of shtick on Twitter talk defend Diver Town, but that was the thing too, is like there is throughout the record this vibe of fun and a sense of even Big Bad Bill, right? It's just a fun lyric. You're listening to it and it's funny, right? Hearing the way Rock is delivering the lyric, and just all through with Happy Trails, the laughing. In fact, that's the thing too, is that there's the story that when they recorded Happy Trails, the middle part, there were 2 takes. The middle part, they cut it out because they were laughing. Those guys were laughing so hard that they basically, Don Landy told me that's how they spliced the 2 takes together, because they had to stop. They were laughing and had to collect themselves. And that's, that's what you said about the sort of the over seriousness. I mean, there is that, obviously with a band like Judas Priest, you're not going to expect them to go up there and be cracking
Yeah,
jokes, and that's part of
their shtick.
their image and that they're supposed to do on stage. But that was one of the things that Roth and all those guys too. I mean, the obviously all the Three Stooges stuff, you can see it in those guys and how they, they incorporated that in their humor. They all those guys had good senses of humor, and that really was something too that I think obviously translated in terms of bands like Poison and all these other bands that, the Silly String and stuff like that, and in their videos and stuff like that. It's like, we're not going to take ourselves too seriously. We're going to act like we're having a great time up here.
And the reality is, then going back to Ed, there really wasn't any competition for him. Yes, there were other great players around, and those great players like Michael Landau and Steve Lukather, they would hear about Eddie. They would be in the Guitar Center playing, and they go, "Oh, you need to hear this kid from Pasadena," and they're like, "Yeah, well, just like every guitar player, oh yeah, sure." But I mean, and those guys are monster players.
Right. Lukather, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, before Lukather deleted his Twitter like 4 or 5 years ago, he was talking about Ed, and this was before Ed passed, I believe, or maybe right after Ed passed, and I said something to him about, Templeman wanted to get Ed going a little bit as a session player. That's why he had him do the Nicolette record. Basically, I think what Ted was trying to do was trying to say, like, hey, look, if Van Halen runs his course in 2 or 3 records, Ed could be the next Lukather. Like, Ed could be the guy. He's that musically talented. Like, could go to Sunset Sound or go to Amigo Studios or whatever, and the record plant and hop in there and do solos for people, and like could do it. And Lukather said that would have ruined Ed. And I think what he meant like that, it would have ruined Ed's creativity and his style. It's sort of been too controlled. And Lukather saying like, that was my thing, but I could never play like Ed, right? I could never do what Ed did. So, but it was interesting to hear him talk about that, with me understanding that was sort of what, again, Templeman wasn't like pushing Ed to do that, but he said, I wanted to give him the credit on the Nicolette record, in part because, yes, I wanted him to play a Nicolette's record because he's fucking great, but also I wanted to have the Ed to have that in his back pocket as a guy like, oh yeah, well, if you need a guy to do a solo or to play in your, this is the guy. I mean, this guy's incredible.
And think of, how did he stumble on the fact of getting a variac and dialing the voltage down? Of course, telling everyone that he was cranking up the voltage.
Right.
People were blowing up their amps trying
to
figure out that. But
well, I mean, yeah, the thing that Don Landee told me when I did the interview with him for Tape Pop magazine, I'd urge people to seek that out too. I did a 2-part interview with Don. I think it's no longer behind a paywall at Tape Pop, and Don, it kind of surprised. I mean, not kind of. I was like shocked when Don told me. I said, well, the guitar sound everybody wants sounds absolutely monstrous, like it's 100 watts. He's like, Ed played quieter than you could imagine in the studio, and that kind of like blew my mind. Like, it's just like, it was just, they turned it down like super low.
It seems like it was from pictures and stuff. Maybe it was 1/412 cab.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you've seen the picture that Roth staged for, was that Van Halen 2, where it's like a wall of amps.
Right. The Neil photos. Yeah.
Beer cans everywhere and all that. I had heard many years later from Bart Walsh, who worked with Roth, and he said Roth would make them drink water out of vodka bottles. He would, so whenever his band, when Roth would rehearse, when you would leave, they'd see all these vodka bottles laying around and empty beer cans. He wanted people to think that they were in there just like wild animals, and so that's why that photo, it's a famous photo.
Sure.
And it's like, so I would see that and go, oh my God, he's playing like a full stack and he's got bomb in there, and it's just this whole thing. And then when you really see pictures of the room they tracked in and see that it looks like there was maybe only 1/412, and the head on top, and you're going, but then with it compressed down by turning the voltage down, the amp would have that sag. so
Right.
that when he's digging into those notes, it gets that squish and that thing that everybody else is playing at standard voltage, and it's like it sounds stiff, and I can't get it. You just had no idea that
Right.
he was doing, because he would always kind of divert. Oh, well, it's a Jose mod, or oh, I turn up the voltage, or it was like a secret, because man, people in that scene would steal everything
Right.
you had, song
Right.
ideas, clothing, whatever.
Right.
It's a rat. It's literally a bunch of
Right.
rats, and they're looking for
Right.
pieces of cheese on the ship. Yeah.
Right. If you I assume you know Gary Putman from Dred Zeppelin, and Gary he still plays with them when they go out and they play, but he was another guy I spoke to for Van Halen Rising, and he first saw them play at a house party in like 1973 or 72 in Arcadia. He was from Arcadia, and but he told me, he was like an Ed had he like hang around and like kind of talk to him, and like, this is before they were, out at like Walter Mitty's and these clubs, and he would see Ed swapping pickups out. And Gary's got these great stories, but he told me that when he first saw the variac, it was in an army like canvas bag, like behind the amps. It was like, it wasn't like, it was like he was like, had like a wall around it where you couldn't see it, but it was basically like in this bag with like kind of the wires going into it. Like he didn't like, later on you can sort of see it like up on top of the amps, or basically after they got signed and they're out on the road, you can see Rudy sitting there, and you can see the variac kind of by the stacks. But which I guess, you probably couldn't see from the audience, but if you were on stage walking around. But he said that, he was coy about that. But, he said that, he'd see Ed, and like Ed would be like doing stuff to the guitar and playing with pickups. And I mean, it's just, the technical, I mean, I think that goes without saying, the technical genius that Ed brought to the building of guitars, the whole amp modification thing. I mean, that's what I mean about the Ed Van Halen thing. It's like, even Hendrix, he had, his guy, like the guy, I forget his name, is Roger. I can't believe I cannot come
Roger
up with
Mayer.
his last, Roger Mayer. I mean, it's like, I don't know how much we know about how much Jimmy knew about amps, but it does not seem he was the same. When he modified his whammy bars, he'd bend, like you'd sort of see they have these longer whammy bars, and he'd be bending it and obviously turning it upside down so the controls are on top. There were definitely things that Hendrix did to sort of change the game with how people approach the guitar, and certainly I'm sure there were things he wanted in his guitar, but I'm not sure Hendrix was taking apart his guitars. He might have been, but I don't know if we have the documentation that Hendrix was like, oh, change out these fuses, or we'll use these different tubes or whatever, or transformers, excuse me, or different tubes in amps. I mean, maybe he was, but it seems like he had his his guy. He sort of would incorporate his vision.
Yeah, yeah, and in Hendrix time, they didn't have road cases, so they
Right.
were literally grabbing these British-made hips, which we know those Marshall heads. They've always been finicky. They're always. It's why I don't own any Marshall heads. No, no offense, Marshall, but the last two or three Marshalls I had, brand new amps. They last one gig, and then it's like it just, and so for him to be able to keep those things up and running, and you figured those guys were broke. Maybe Ross' dad had money, but I don't think the Van Halens had much money at all.
Oh
And
no, they were broke.
and
They were
and
broke.
and so, and I said, man, those guys were hungry. And it takes that. If a guy has everything handed to him, these guys were immigrants. They came across the boat. They're biracial. They didn't speak the language, and they already had that musical talent.
Right.
And so
Right.
all they could really do was immerse themselves in the music and to get out of their situation, because their dad was a musician too. So, I mean, he didn't have any money, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. Yeah, the thing I'm really interested in Alex's book is to hear how he kind of dives into his father's life and career. From what I was able to put together, Van Halen Rising, and Alex might have a totally 180-degree different take. It's his dad will always defer 100% to what he says, but that his father had a big career, a reasonably big career in Europe, where he played on the radio. There was some transcription discs of him playing on radio shows, and had this had a regular gig on a radio show, and then he came to America, and big band music and jazz music was not popular, and so his fortunes really went down the tubes. And I always thought that must have been a major. I'll be interested to hear how Alex gets into that. I'm hoping he really will, about how much that drove him, because I can only imagine how crushing that was for the father to come to the United States thinking, I'm going to be sort of the breadwinner and kind of come here. What you've made money on doing in Europe, which is supported the family, suddenly you're like, I have to be a janitor, basically, like literally have to be a janitor to pay the bills. And that had to be incredibly psychologically damaging. I mean, to the father, and also for the brothers to see that. I mean, I have to believe that helped fuel. I mean, they always talk about, Alex and Ed, about how they loved to see their parents come and watch them, particularly their father, and their father would have tears in his eyes and had the Van Halen on the marquee and everything. And I can imagine that was a big driver for the brothers too, to sort of, we're going to finish the job for dad, basically. That dad should have, I'm not sure Jan wanted to come to America and be famous, but then Jan thought he would have who knows, that he'd be playing on the Tonight Show or something like that, just to kind of give an idea of what maybe he thought like a regular paying gig as a musician. Yeah. And it never happened for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it kind of comes down to, if he's doing a certain type of work over there and you get here and that kind of work is not, there. I mean, and stylistically, it's like the music's changed, and that's a big thing that I talk about on my channel. If I'd have stayed out in LA and only played hair metal, I would have been done. I literally went from playing hair metal to smooth jazz in a week, because I wanted a gig. I wanted to keep playing. And I moved from LA to Nashville, and somebody goes, hey, you want to play a gig? It pays $75. Yeah. Well, what is it? Smooth jazz. Okay. I mean, but I had grown up playing in jazz band and gone to school and studied that stuff. So I was like, well, I've done this before. I just got to forget about all that debauchery and craziness.
Right.
And that haunted me. That's haunted me now, because I can't really, go to a gig and work with a band where it's like, we're Christian and we sit here and we hold our hands, because I've been through war. And so, it's like, when you've been in war, you don't take a soldier off the battlefield and throw him in a Christian recital. It's right. It's not a good place,
Right.
But those guys,
and Nashville's the place too. Like, it talks about, talk about needing to be being musically versatile. Right. That's the key to being a working musician in Nashville.
Yeah. And then, country music changed, and that's why I ended up touring with country artists. I didn't go there to play country. I don't even like country music.
Right.
But all of a sudden country's playing arenas. Well, what do you need? You need bling. And I would just, I did an interview with Randy O from Odin, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's an incredible interview. It just came out Sunday. And I told him, I said, dude, as soon as they threw me out there and there were 20,000 people in there, all of a sudden I've got the Floyd Rose, I'm doing dive bombs, I'm hitting power chords, I'm doing all the shtick from back then, because it was like I had to get it out of my system. And for me, if I was at the concert, that's what I would want to see.
Right. Something that's going to reach the top of the arena.
You're going to hear it at the top of the arena when you go out there with that hoarse, it's just, it's going to, like, you want to hear the drums. That Van Halen would start concerts and it's like, the drum fill and then the squeal. And it's just like, the earth is parted and now God has arrived.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a clip of those guys from like 88 going on stage, and it's like with Ed backstage, and Ed has this big smile on his face, and they're just at the side of the stage, and he's doing his thing, and Alex is up on the drums, and the guys haven't come running out yet. And it's I mean, they like just knew how to take the room from like, kind of an excited energy to like just like a 10 before they even came on stage, just from that stuff Ed used to do with the squeals, like you said, the dive bombs, and Alex doing all the fills and the huge power chords. To me, that's a lot of that is Live at Leeds, Young Man's Blues, right? That sort of did it.
Yeah.
And they would just, they listen to that record. I mean, there's so many sources for that. For me, like that live record, particularly, we hear like Keith Moon and Townsend just sort of doing the huge power chord and just a massive swash of the cymbals from and the crazy fills. I mean, that just you can't help but like have your blood pressure go crazy.
Yeah, and Alex Van Halen, unsung, hero. Also the whole thing where it's like guitar and drums. It seemed like that Sunset Strip scene. The bass player was always kind of the afterthought of the band. Now, Michael Anthony is a great bass player and a great vocalist, but in that Sunset Strip scene, if you had a guy that looked good and you strap a bass on him, we used to call it dumb guy. You go, well, what do I play on this? Go, dum, 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 dum.
Exactly.
Because we don't need you to say too much. Just stay over there and
right,
dum,
right.
dum, 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 and let the adults write the song, you know.
Right.
But without Alex Van Halen's signature drum sound, which I still don't really fully understand his snare drum sound. It's almost like there's no snare springs. I'm not a drummer, so I can't really comment
Right.
on that. But and then Michael Anthony with the P bass. The P bass, Ted Templeman said, was the greatest sounding, rock bass there is. You've got I know a lot of bass players that play funk and play different styles of music, and they all like the jazz bass. But the P bass has way more low end and is way rounder sounding and that is that bass sound on that record. It's the sound of a P bass through an SVT, and that is a undeniable combination.
Yeah, another great bass sound that Don Landy and Ted did was Tyran Porter on all the Doobie Brothers records. I mean, that stuff, like taking it to the streets and all that stuff, those bass sounds were really great, a little bit of direct to then Mike the amp or whatever else. But particularly Don was a genius when it came to getting those bass sounds. I think with the first Van Halen record, it may have got the goal was to blow up the guitar sound and sort of the bass might have taken a back seat. But by the time you get to Fair Warning and stuff like that, you're getting some really, really great bass sounds from Mike and some great playing. And of course, that whole album, that fourth album with the drums too, particularly really, really great Alex drum sound on that one.
Yeah, they progressed. They couldn't really top the bombastic nature of one. Two is kind of like the movie is, let's see, Porky's 2.
Right.
Second album
Jaws
is like
2.
Porky's 2. Yeah, or any decent sequel that you're like, okay, I'm happy with this. The popcorn was a little stale, but no, I'm good. The
Right.
product was good. And then I felt they started to fall off a little bit on Women and Children First. To me, it sounded like the band was getting a little deeper in their cups.
Oh yeah.
The money is there. The women are there. There's a lot of it just sounds to me slightly distracted, but it's still amazing and bombastic. Everybody wants some, and the Cradle Will Rock. Those songs are
Right.
incredible. And then, In a Simple Rhyme is a cool tune.
Right.
And
oh yeah, the harmonies in that too are just so like that's like unbelievable, right? The harmonies in the way just the way out of the record to hear that being kind of the end, those incredible harmonies is just what a way to end the record.
Yeah. But it did seem like as far as I think more so in Ed's case, there wasn't that as much innovation on that third record as there was the first record, Eruption, the second record, Spanish Fly. And those are just mind-blowing, like
Right.
take your head off. And there wasn't that moment on the third record. It's a great record. You put that record on and you can party, which is what all of those records are. You put any one of those albums on in a room with people our age and crank it up and say, come on, Gramps, get out the rocking chair. We're going to be fired up.
Yeah.
It's just, it's lightning in a bottle. Now, is it, I call it performance enhancing drugs. The difference between Van Halen and what happened to the Strip with Guns N' Roses and all that, those bands were taking it way too far in doing, hard, stuff that I don't even have to talk about what exactly they were doing, but they were taking the party to a very dark place.
Right. Yeah, Roth always talked about that, the idea of crafting your buzz, right? I didn't want to just like that was the thing. He's like, he did this interview with Musician Magazine, and they're like, "What's the, something about being a rock star?" He's like, "You have to craft your buzz, which is like not get so fucked up that you fall down, right, or let you end up like in rehab, or that you're like a junkie with needles in your arm. You just want to just get enough fucked up so you have a good time."
Yeah, just enough. I mean, you've got to do your job, and we have that incident with Perry Farrell assaulting Dave Navarro, and people were saying that he's walking around with a wine bottle on stage, and
Right,
that's crossing the line. Van Halen,
right,
much acrimony as they had over the years,
right,
we never saw actual fisticuffs or any violence, at least in the public eye.
right. I'll tell you a story. I will leave the band. I don't have a lot of these stories like this, and it didn't happen to me. But my friend from elementary school was going to med school in New York City, and he was living maybe in the Bowery, kind of a low, a low rent neighborhood. And he went into this bar, and the singer of a very, very famous grunge band, it's not Perry Farrell, but another band we would recognize, was sitting at the bar, and it was sitting there. And he looked at my friend, and they were the only two ones at the bar with the bartender. And he goes, "Hey, can you help me with something?" And my friend said, "Sure, okay." And he said, and like he walked to the bathroom, and my friend walked in, and he said, "Come here." This guy said, "Come here." And the guy went in the stall, and my friend Andy walked in the stall, and the guy went to shoot up, and he said, "Hold my bicep." And my friend held
Oh
his
my.
bicep, held his bicep, and he knew who he was. He knew who he was, but he said, like, in the moment, he was like, just like, kind of like deer in the headlight, and then like he walked out of the stall and left and didn't say a word.
Dude,
And
I would have
but
turned around. I was at nah, this party.
I
I'm out, bro. I'm out.
and if you had met my friend, like he would never ever think like that. He's just the way he told me the story. It was just like the guy was like looking at him and was like, "I need you to hold my arm," and he was just like, "Okay," it's like, and he shot up.
oh my God.
I mean, that's in terms of like, yeah, not appropriately crafting your buzz. That's not it.
Yeah,
That's not it.
it's not it. And it's like the jazz musicians learned that the hard way,
Right,
the 30s
right.
and the 40s, and why Charlie
Like
Parker.
the Chet Bakers who like, would wear long sleeves all the time because he's all, scarred up
Yeah.
and like,
And that
right.
was,
That's
the jazz musician's struggle is way more maybe than even a rock star because you've got a smaller audience. You,
right, right,
it's an acquired hearing. Not everybody can hear when you're
right,
playing outside over a chord change. Most people aren't that sophisticated, you know.
right, right,
And
right,
that brings it back to Van Halen in that figuring out how to play, interesting solos, play cool later, on some of the stuff, cool chord voicings, not the typical stuff, and being able to do it and improvise and pull in the chicks, and so you pull it
oh
in.
yeah,
It
yeah, such a great point. Such a great point. For the, because look, I mean, I love Rush as much as the next guy, but like most very musically sophisticated rock is not chick friendly. I mean, no offense to, I love Rush. I would, saw Rush, love Rush, own Rush albums, big fan. It's just not, and that's what those guys figured out, where you could have the musically sophisticated, and particularly musically sophisticated and sort of jaw dropping musicality that still had a room that was 60-70% women in some cases, which is like, again, like Zeppelin. There's a few other bands who could do that. Very, very few could pull it
yeah.
off.
You think it's Dave and Eddie? I think were the two heartthrobs, right? I mean, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think those guys were very photogenic. I mean, let's just put a fine point on it, right? That was it. I mean, I think that's the thing. There's always going to be a couple of guys, and the thing was that they played the role. I think one of the things a friend, a guy who interviewed for the book, his name's Dave Shelton, was an LA guitar player, and he had a band, if I remember correctly, the band was called the Gas Moguls, and forgive me if I tell the story, and I'll tell as quickly as I can. But they were like a kind of a punk band, and Dave was a guy who had met Ed and had been to Ed's house and was a young guitarist, and Ed had took a liking to him, taught him how to play a couple of Van Halen songs. He saw Dave in like 1979 out, and they ran into each other, and he's like, "What are you doing, man?" He's like, "We're getting the band going." And Dave was just dressed in like jeans and a t-shirt. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "If you're," Ed said to him, like, "If you're in, you need to be in." Like, basically, like, if you want to be a rock star, you better, like, like walking around wherever they were walking around, was a strip or something, like, you better be ready to do it. Like, basically kind of telling him, like, you're not there. Like, maybe in fact, like, maybe I can get away with that, but like, because you're not there and you need to like commit. Yeah. Like, whatever he was wearing, he was like, "That's not it, man. Like, that's not going to work." And it was just kind of crazy to think about that. But Dave said it was a very kind of like impactful moment for him, because he was like, Ed Van Halen looking him in the face and going, "If you really want this, you need to work on like your image. Like, it's not get the right haircut." Like, Ed always had, like, he never didn't like get his haircut. Like, he always had that perfect shag haircut. He might have been wearing quirky clothes, but like, those guys, they sold the image, and they bought the Rockstar cars and they did it. And like, that was a very interesting moment to hear. That wasn't Roth. That was Ed basically pulling this guy aside and saying, "Look, you better lean into it all the way if you want to really want your band to make it."
And they may have been really the last rock stars, because the reality is, and I talk about on my channel, if you're in Warrant right now, or you're Don Dokken, or you're any number of these guys, and I don't know what anybody's finances are, but I know we all need cash. You might be worth $20 million, but it could be tied up in your house and your cars and your alimony payments and all these different things. And so these guys are still having to go out there, probably 10 guys in a bus, pulling a trailer with their gear and playing the fairs and playing, just like the country acts are doing. It's, you got sidemen and 10 guys on a bus and 2, 3 crew guys and doing that. But Van Halen ascended to the top of Howdy Doody Mountain, as David Lee Roth called it. and with the cars, and Ed could afford to hole up like a hermit for years. And you go, what is going on? The one sin that David Lee Roth said Eddie Van Halen committed was that he, wasted time or something like that?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he was up there recording, but will we ever hear anything from the vault? What is your opinion?
Wow. Okay. This might be like, you cut it here for episode 2. I think I'm pausing because I honestly don't know what to think anymore. I want to take Wolfgang at his word, and I will, that he said that he'll eventually will get to that he's working on his band now, and the band is doing extremely well. I think they're really building an audience in Europe now, and it's been fun to watch that. I understand from his perspective that you don't want to do a drive-by where you're just like, you kind of come in for 2 days and some guys, whoever they are, kind of play some stuff for you, and you're like, "Yeah, let's put this shit out," and then you're like, realize, "Oh, we really shouldn't have done that," like 6 months later, or you don't invest. And so the reality is there is a tremendous amount of material that's up there. We all know that. We've all seen the wall of tapes. You have a recording studio in your backyard. You have Don Landee, who was up there even just, we want to talk like from 82, 83 till 80, 88 when Don, I guess early 89 when Don departed, 5150. I mean, you're up there, you're playing, he's recording. He even talked to me about, Don even talked to me about, the introduction to 1984, that Don, the way he remembered it, Ed was playing his keyboard through a pig nose and was just playing it, and Don recorded it, and Ed didn't even know it was being recorded. He's like, "Oh, you recorded that?" Like that 30 minutes of stuff. Like, he was just like, had his head down and was playing, and Don was in the control room. Like, maybe he was working with a tape machine and he rolled the tape. So you can imagine, if you have an engineer in your control room and you're making music, the engineer records it. The engineer is like genetically programmed to be like, "We should record this." Yeah. "We should record this." You run a cassette, if nothing else. You run tape. So there's no doubt a tremendous amount of stuff. Don told me that, Ed playing piano, like stuff that probably wouldn't be maybe commercially marketable to a wide, you're not like, oh, like a brand new song. But again, like any brand new song, I mean, even like a new Led Zeppelin song, if it came out tomorrow, like out of the vault, it would make waves for 4, 5, 6 days, and it would be on to something else.
Yeah.
But the type of stuff that I would like to see, would be, a diversity of stuff, particularly to kind of show the sides of Eddie Van Halen that maybe most people don't know. I know that Don told me that he was very disappointed that they didn't do a solo album. Not disappointed like this is a bad idea to make another Van Halen record, but it seemed like when Roth quit, there was going to be a period of time that was going to be open to doing an Eddie Van Halen solo record. And what ended up happening, I think as most people know, is that Ed thought better of it. He went to get a new singer. And plus the problem was that you're going to look at your brother. I mean, Don didn't say this, but I'm saying this, like, you're going to look at your brother and go, oh, by the way, you just kind of chill out for 6 months while I do a solo record. And I have like, I like have Picaro come up here and play drums for me or whatever. And we do a solo record. Yeah. But Don's regret was that there were sides of the Eddie that were not going to fit in Van Halen necessarily. That would have been cool to be able to hear. The other things really quickly, I would say that I would love to hear come out beyond like, a Sammy outtake or like a Ed and Al unfinished. Yeah, he just called it unfinished, but an Ed and Al music song idea, maybe that would be cool to hear for on a record. But it's just the soundtrack stuff that he did, the wildlife stuff. Don told me there was a tremendous amount of stuff that was done for wildlife that they didn't use. And again, it's going to be like, we know, like 2 minutes of like Ed soloing behind what would have been a scene that maybe isn't a song, but it's like a little jam thing, or maybe it's just a little groove or something like that. There's that. There's also the Seduction of Gina stuff, which I would love to hear, which is the soundtrack he did for the Valerie TV movie with the keyboard stuff, which to me was really the beginning as he moved more and more into that realm with Oh You Wait 1-2 and with 5150. It's really interesting to hear that stuff being done in 83. That was very, very heavy keyboard stuff. But I honestly don't know. It's a very long answer, I know, but I don't know what's going to come of it, because again, is it a matter of two of like Wolf and Alex have to be 100% on board with everything. I have no idea what the sort of the Van Halen Inc. politics of that either. It could be hard, right? It could be hard to find it. Maybe it wouldn't be, but it could be. I could see it being hard to find agreement, perhaps, on what should be out or what shouldn't be. You have somebody's son and a brother who obviously recorded the music with his brother for the majority of his whole career, but then you have Wolf, who was just there for a smaller period of time and wasn't alive for some of the stuff is recorded. You might have very different opinions, right? Which might be. And again, maybe they'll become totally simpatico and then their thoughts about things, but also could be hard to find middle ground. It's just hard to know. It's really hard to know. And that's just me speculating. I have no idea. It could be easy. It could be hard.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's a shame because I could see an Eddie Van Halen box set, Eddie Van Halen legend, and all the things that you just described, put all those unique bits and pieces, and I'm sure there's plenty of this, and I'm sure there's some cool this, and I'm sure there's some experimental stuff. And if you put together the right package, it would take him as a name right alongside where he needs to be with Hendrix as far as just an entity on his own. Because
that's to me too. I mean, exactly. That's to me. I mean, that's to me. If I had control of that sort of project, I mean, that to me would be the one thing. It's like Don and Ted both told me that Ed, Don. Well, I'll tell you what Ted said. Ted, he's like, Ed could play bass like a motherfucker. He's like, you have no idea how great that guy could play bass. He's like, you just have no idea, And so all the wildlife stuff that was done, that's Ed on bass, and Ed also played. And again, I think the whole Ed played on bass on all this early shit is always completely overblown. Some of the later stuff, maybe the sort of after the studio was built, but Don certainly recorded Ed playing bass on a lot of the wildlife. I think for people to hear that would be like, holy shit, this guy can play bass. And again, the keyboard stuff, the piano stuff, not just sort of the stuff within the context of a Hagar era song, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the way Don described it, it's just Ed playing by himself. Like, let's hear that, right? Let's hear
Yeah.
him play by himself, playing drums,
Yeah.
playing drums. I mean, this is the level of musicality that sort of, I think kind of gets lost. I think when people sort of have that comic book caricature of Eddie Van Halen, guitar superhero, which he was, but when Don would be like, oh yeah, Ed played, Ed played drums on that song "Crossing Over," which was a song that they put out on Balance. That was done in 1983, I believe. The original demo for that they used for "Crossing Over," where it's in one channel is the original demo, and then there's the new song in the other, and that's Ed playing drums.
Wow.
It would be cool. Let's hear that 1983
Yeah.
demo of Ed, just instrumental. You don't need Roth, you don't need any singers, you don't just let's hear him, do his thing. But yeah, that would be. I mean, and maybe for me, that would be where I would hope there might be an agreement to be like, okay, there's politics around the Hagar stuff, there's politics around whatever, there's a lot of lead singer politics, as we know, and just sort of get away from that. Just be like,
Yeah.
let's just pay tribute to the guy. He's not here anymore. Let's pay tribute to
Yeah.
him as a musician, and like just really bring those unknown aspects. I say unknown, by the general public, the aspects of him as a musician. I always, think about, they'll always have these shows about, I'm just kind of making this up, like Picasso in this period where they have a show at a museum, and they'll highlight like, I'm just making this up completely off the top of my head, like, Picasso, like the flower paintings or something like that. People are like, oh, that gives people excited to go like, oh, look at these 10 or 12 paintings of flowers that Picasso did. No one's really done a deep dive into this aspect of his career. That's what gets people excited about this sort of new interpretation, or this new way to consider this person as an artist. That's what we should be doing with Eddie Van Halen, not putting out like more. Again, look, I'd love to have a new Roth song, a new Van Halen Hagar song. That'd be great, but like, let's emphasize the other aspects
Yeah.
of that, and
Yeah.
even like the Ed and Al thing. Like, those guys played together up there all the time.
Yeah.
Obviously without Mike a lot of times,
Yeah.
without Dave, without Sammy,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
up there, Ed and Al. Let's hear that. Let's hear those guys improvising and doing their thing, or that would be amazing.
And there may be even tapes of Ed playing with other bands. I've had people tell me there's a bass player, John Santos, Dave Santos, who played with Billy Joel and all the, he's like a big time New York guy for a while. And he told me that he was hired to go over to Ed's place and play, and he put together a band and play, in 5150. So there could be things like that. There was that blonde female singer that they were jamming with for a while. I don't remember the name.
Sass Jordan. Yeah, Sass
Maybe
Jordan. Yeah.
there's stuff up there that they did with
I mean,
her.
look, yeah, Patty Smythe came up there, played. I mean, I know that Don told me about that. I mean, I don't think I know. Don also mentioned that there would be people to come up there, and visitors. And again, I'm not sure that like Don was up there rolling tape up the time, but there were, yeah, like let's just see what else is up there. I mean, that's the thing too. Is that it doesn't have to be to the extreme of the Hendrix, where, especially in the early '70s. I mean, that's the cautionary tale where all that stuff got put out, and some of it's okay, a lot of it's bad, and there's a lot of just basically like money grabbing and violation of really what should have been. Somebody should have been able to come in, and there was nobody around to do that. Unfortunately, to stop and say this is wrong. But I will give credit where credit is due. Where, again, understanding, I'm guessing that Wolf and Alex don't need money in the way that maybe someone else in a different situation who has a artist who passes away, who has a catalog that could be used, but they've at least been smart enough to say, we're not ready, right? They're obviously not ready. Like there hasn't been anything rushed to market. I mean, that's really the regret, where you can be like, oh, I'm not saying they would do that, but it can happen where it's a tale as old as time, right? With Buddy Holly, all these guys, this stuff starts coming out, and it's just like, it probably should have come out, like, or whatever it was. It just wasn't good enough, right? Where there wasn't a sort of rush to pick all the stuff out and just throw it out there. So, let's hope. I really do hope that, and I believe that Wolf will find the time to do it. It's just in matter of yeah, what direction they want to go and just how it works with the politics of the singers. I mean, that's why I think they just stay away from that stuff and just do the soundtrack. I was thinking like a record store day, like put out the Seduction as Gina as a record store day release.
Yeah.
There's like, like 20 minutes of music. There's a number of different instrumental parts. You can see the movie on YouTube and, but there's all the talking and the dialogue there because it's you can only hear it with the actual broadcast of it. But let's hear hear all the intricacies of it or the wildlife stuff. Get Cameron Crowe to write an essay about the wildlife and working with Ed and what that was like. And, that put out all that stuff that's sitting up there, presumably because they didn't use it all. I mean, that was what, because that's what Don told me. It wasn't all, you just ended up doing more stuff than they ended up using for the movie.
Yeah. Let's send that out as a message to the Van Halen camp.
Right.
Friendly.
Like,
hey, don't forget
like tuning in the Brad and Greg, the Greg message. Here it
don't
comes.
Take offense, but if you could just throw us a few crumbs, maybe, because we're not going to be here forever, and would like to hear little Ed Van Halen.
And and again, I'd say that with all sincerity to say, I'm sure there is stuff that you're like, everybody does stuff that's not, I mean, a writer, you're a musician, you're like, that's not really very good. I'm not going to publish that tomorrow. I'm not going to be like, oh, let me go throw this up on the web and let people read it. It just didn't work or whatever. It's kind of an idea that didn't go anywhere. You and I, neither of us are talking about that. We're talking about the sort of things where you can listen and go, yeah, that didn't fit in the context of a Van Halen record, or this is just, this was a very interesting moment here that should be heard. When you have a studio it's like 1983 and you've had engineers who are working up there, I'm sure we could find 20 minutes of music per year where we'd be like, this is killer. Let's just talk about the worst case scenario. There's, there's enough to put together, a box set of something or, whatever, or just like I said, a record store day release or something like that, like Eddie Van Halen playing piano. I mean, just, pump people to just, the reality is too, and I'm sure Wolfgang understands this, is like, there's always going to be people who are going to be like, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. And always be negative. And I think that's the thing. It's sort of, none of us are getting any younger. The notion that I think Wolfgang has said, and I think he's right, is like, they put out the really good shit. They put out Panama. They put out Hot for Teacher. It wasn't like they were like, yeah, we'll just put that one on the shelf. But there's going to be other things that are going to be cool and interesting and amazing. And, there's probably not going to be like a lifetime changing track that's going to suddenly pop out of the Van Halen vault. But there's going to be stuff that's going to be like, holy shit, like this guy, this band did things that we didn't expect and we didn't imagine. And there certainly are going to be songs and song ideas that would come out of the sort of the making of different albums, obviously, that could be exploited as well. I don't mean exploited in a bad way, but could be like, oh, this is worth putting on a record and putting out. This is good.
Absolutely. Well, man, I just want to say thanks because
I loved it.
Man, I'm telling you, I have so much fun doing these interviews, and this is another amazing interview. Get the book, Van Halen Rising by Greg Renoff. I'll put the link in the description for the video. This video is going to air Sunday at 8 a.m. And, who knows? Maybe some huge Van Halen revelation will come and we'll have you back. I hope we sell.
Hopefully before you hit publish on this one, there'll be like box set announced. And we'll be like, oh shit, we need to cancel our episode.
Cancel. Yeah. No, I don't think that's gonna happen. But man, I've had so much fun. It's spirited conversation.
Yeah.
And dude, you rock. Thank you.
Oh man, appreciate it. Anytime.
All right,
Let's do it again soon. Okay, talk to you.